What are the most terrifying facts about human nature? Story 1. Unbridled greed. You have people who have billions of dollars in their bank account, but are willing to burn the environment just for a few more. They literally own more than any of us could make in 1,000 lifetimes. But screw it, have to push that profit margin. I might be able to take a stab at this one. After a few million in the bank, it stops being about personal or family security. You and your family are now set for life, and nothing short of disaster will change that. There are thousands of people who have this, and stay quietly in the shadows with very little interest in changing the world beyond the one they live in. They have as much influence as you or me. They can't get into Hollywood parties, nobody knows them. However, at the very tippy top of the corporate and political world lies people with large obligations to so many people: shareholders, executives, board members, employees, political leaders, political debutantes, people whose company you wish to keep, as it's not your money that gives you strength, it's your influence. Your money leads to your influence, which is why it becomes your duty. Influence means lots of people doing you favors and asking them in return. Eventually, you get in too deep. There are favors to be done. There are promises to keep. There are criteria that must be met. Your influence has become your reputation. That reputation has taken over your life, way more than money has. Money is just a number. You have more than enough. Story 2. How lazy they are about seeing things from someone else's perspective. People who complain about racism have no issue with homophobia. Feminists who hate trans people, like, how do you not see the parallels? I was talking to my friend about jealousy, and he was all like, you shouldn't let that affect you. All I had to do was ask how he would feel if I did something with his GF, and he immediately got where I was coming from. Like, it takes so little effort to not be an insensitive a-hole, but somehow the world is full of a-holes. Story 3. Selfishness, ignorance, and narcissism. I see it on the internet all the time, and I can't help myself, but I really want to punch some people when I'm online. A few days ago, there was a car crash involving 4 people aged 18, 19. A car burst into flames. 18 and 19-year-old girls in the back seat could not be saved and burned alive. I saw a forum thread later that day about it, and many people were actually leaving heartless comments, like they got what they sought. They had some weed in the car, and the co-driver had some alcohol. But nobody knew what actually happened. They just judged and said they were right. But it's a stupid forum, so I don't know what I expected. Story 4. The fact that some humans will spontaneously attack others, physically or psychologically, with extreme malice and intent to harm. It's one thing when a person has been brainwashed to believe they are doing something good, as in holy wars. I'm talking about acts of abuse, or confinement and slow, painful killing for no particular reason except an urge to hurt another person. Some scientists believe chimpanzees also are capable of acting with malice because they possess a level of empathy similar to ours, and therefore know they're causing someone else to suffer. They attack each other in ways that seem to provide no benefit to the aggressor, except seeing the other chimp's reaction. Stealing her baby and killing it in front of her, for example. They're like caricatures of humankind. It's rather telling that our closest living relatives are extremely dangerous to us, and we cannot live together. We humans have to choose our companions from less volatile stock than our own cousins, like dogs and bunny rabbits. Story 5. The absolutely over-the-top sense of ego most people have. The fact that a lot of people are so closed-minded and self-centered that they won't even listen to what you have to say. They just wait for their turn to speak. The fact that a lot of people aren't willing to help a stranger, even if it takes 5 seconds, because they're too wrapped up in their own lives. We're all the protagonists in our own story, but society would be a much better place if we were all each other's hero in our story. Story 6. There are quite a few things we could put out that would be totally valid. But I'm going to say this: the ability to rationalize whatever they want. No one wants to see themselves as a bad guy. So even if they are raping children or gunning down nuns who are feeding the poor, they have somehow rationalized to themselves that they had a good reason to do it. But that's not the worst part. Every single person reading this comment isn't just capable of this. They do it, and they don't even know it. I'm the same. I look back sometimes and think, I was full of such bullcrap in every part of our lives. Taking too long of a break at work? I'm sure you have a way to excuse it. Got in a car accident? Maybe you blame them. Everyone does it in their own little unique way. Story 7. Disproportionate discipline/retribution. Anytime someone messes up, even over a little thing, The focus is often more about the punishment than it is about the teaching. Whether it's parenting, online arguments, the treatment of addicts in our society, racism, and other social phobias, people think that anger is enough of a justification and let their emotions autopilot. If it becomes this never-ending thing, F you didn't care about the person involved bettering themselves. You just wanted revenge. In some cases, cough mother cough. It's often accidentally upsetting someone being worse than the temper tantrum they respond with. Don't act high and mighty and then not accept an apology. It's the biggest problem I have with how some people interpret religion as well. Some of these same people also lament about how the world is messed up and beyond repair, which totally contradicts the idea of that'll teach them a lesson. Even if they mean well and want to help, some people often lecture based on thoughtless gut feelings, and it takes a lot of wasted time before they finally calm down and listen, after the emotional damage is already done. The fact that people act so surprised that my SO and I can have a civil argument without it turning into a screaming match really says something. Story 8. Our inherent tribalism. You can have 10 people in a room/cave/wherever, and by the end of a day they'll have split into at least 2 different groups. By the end of the week, each group will have what they believe to be solid reasons not to trust the other groups. By the end of another week, each group will have reasons to openly hate the other groups. And within the month, some of them will probably turn to violence because they believe their tribe is endangered by the other groups. Once that happens, then there's war. And the thing is, the reasons to hate each other will be idiotic and meaningless most of the time. Doesn't matter. We still break into tribes and declare each other enemies every single time. Story 9. All human relationships are conditional and transactional, but we've constructed this system of fictions to convince ourselves, and especially our children, that innate goodness and kindness are what really matter. And as long as you're a good person, someone will love you. In the real world, nobody gives a crap about who you are as a person. You are nothing but what you can offer to other people. Don't have skills that other people don't have? You'll be poor. Don't have physical beauty or social status? You'll be alone. If you aren't offering some kind of service or benefit to being friends with you, you won't have any friends. Maybe that would all be okay if we were raised from birth to understand that all we are is what we have to offer others. But no, we're raised to believe what's on the inside matters more than what's on the outside. But really, your stat sheet and physical appearance are the only thing that matters. And growing up is the process of realizing that innate human value is a lie. In fact, with 7 billion people in the world, humans are the least valuable commodity this side of hydrogen. Story 10. I can list it as a ton of related problems. Refusal to think critically or logically, especially about important topics, ignorance and outright refusal or apathy when it comes to the pursuit of truth, etc. But I guess it can be summed up as one major behavior: an individual's inability or refusal to believe that he or she could, in some capacity they may or may not be able to recognize, be wrong. It absolutely amazes and disgusts me how many people refuse to even entertain the notion that they may not understand or have drawn a correct conclusion on the subject they're discussing, or that gasp there might not actually be a knowable or right answer. Story 11. That people have to be fake for everything. At least in America, the politics have to lie and be fake in order to be elected. Then when they get in, they destroy everything. People are suggested to lie and fake to get dates, and after they get married, they let themselves go and be jerks to each other. In reality, they just hid their true selves to lure you in for themselves, and then you find they're not anything like you think. People are suggested to lie and be fake at job interviews, wearing clothes that have nothing to do with their personality or the job itself. People exaggerate themselves, or else they'll be afraid to not be hired anywhere. You have to be honest at these interviews. Yet the melons that DID get hired are the same people who, after you hire, decide to slack off or quit a week later because the job was too hard. Even after they put down their hard-working people on their application and tell the interviewer/manager what they want them to hear. We're constantly pushed to be 100% perfect on a daily basis, whether it be looks, personality, being wealthy, for a job. It's terrifying how much humans are pushed to not be humans. None of us are perfect. We all have our flaws, both looks, personality, and lifestyle choice. We can't win in this world. Story 12. Definitely vanity. This includes things like a $3 billion yacht made of gold, diamond everything, plastic surgery, designer clothing, and trying desperately to distinguish oneself from other people, specifically to make oneself appear to be of more value than others. I want to be unique, that's fine, but the need to be superior to others is the absolute most disgusting thing about human beings to me, and it brings out the worst behavior, in my opinion. When you think of yourself to be superior, you entitle yourself to exploiting others with no remorse. Story 13. The WHO reports 600,000 non-smokers are killed every year by cigarettes. 6 million in total. Public smoking is objectively the most disgusting thing in the entire world. Judging from these stats, 420,000 die from violence. Secondhand smoke from a free-based designer drug cocktail kills more people than violence. Do you understand this? A hygiene problem from irresponsible drug addicts is literally worse than warfare and murder combined. If you believe in peace, environmentalism, if you have any respect for any medical authority, or if you just believe in hygiene, you would not smoke in public. These addicts are like creationists or anti-vaccinationists in their ignorance and misunderstanding of what is hard, non-controversial science. Secondhand smoke is even more unhealthy than first-hand smoke. No doctor is going to condone public smoking. Story 14, bullying. It's immature, and it does nothing but boost your own ego at the expense of someone else. Yeah, this is coming from someone who was bullied from middle elementary school to high school. When I was 11 or 12 years old, some neighborhood boys brought me along on a walk into the woods, only to abandon me in the middle of them. I probably spent 2 hours there, and only found my way home because I had walked along the trails with my family and had a good memory. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been able to do that and was stuck there. Bet it would have been fun to explain to the parents why you ditched a little girl in the woods because you thought she was weird and dumb. I won't even mention the time I got pulled into the principal's office because some kids thought it would be funny to get on the computer I used in computer class to send my teacher a flirty email. Let's jeopardize a teacher's reputation. Because lols. Though now hopefully they're telling kids the danger of the remember me function. Story 15. Being disrespectful to the elderly. Yes, it takes them longer to do things like walk across the mall, pull out of the parking lot, or express a thought. Newsflash. It is going to happen to you too someday. I am a geriatric nurse and have a spectacular relationship with my grandparents. These people have fought wars, raised families, and contributed to society just as the younger generations are doing now. They deserve respect, not contempt. Also, it kills me when families don't visit the people I take care of, even when they're dying. It saddens me to think that I might be the only person who genuinely loves them, holds their hand as they are dying, and will truly miss them. Story 16. The most obvious response, and one that can be substituted with nearly anything in this thread, is just this: irrationality. The world would be better if people were more rational, and I don't mean in the rational choice sense, which is basically egoism. I mean for people to try and live deliberately and try and understand the consequences of their actions before they perform them. Does this particular action cause more harm than good? And is there a more viable solution to this? Acting rationally and deliberately is so easy, and there aren't any really good excuses not to. Everyone is capable of it, and it has nothing to do with perceived levels of intelligence. Just do it. Story 17. I despise when rich, affluent people act like they know what's best for everyone. Many of these wealthy, out-of-touch pieces of dirt have never lived life as a poor man. They had rich parents who paid for their college education. Daddy pulled strings to get them into a decent starting position in a good company. I also can't stand stuck-up women that married into money and never had to work for anything. But the worst has to be when these well-to-do people get into a political office. All of a sudden, they get to make the rules for the American people. There's no way people like this can have any understanding of what it is like to live paycheck to paycheck, live without a security system, or be stuck in a bad location with no money to move. They will never know the responsibility of having to protect their families themselves. Humans who disgust me for their arrogance. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Robert Casey, Piers Morgan, among many, many others. Just about any rich politician willing to take our rights away for their own ignorance. Story 18. How people idolize celebs for doing something even slightly nice, but how no one hears about the people who give their lives for all of our safety. Like, say, a soldier. There are soldiers who sacrifice their own lives to save those around them, like jumping on a grenade to keep nearby troops safe. Even when one does something so selfless and heroic that they earn the Medal of Honor, they never get the recognition they deserve. Instead of hearing about them on the news, you just hear celeb gossip. Makes me sick. Story 19. Prejudging guilt. We are supposed to have a legal system based on the concept of innocence until proven guilty. In addition, the accuser must prove their case beyond all reasonable doubt. It is not up to the accused to prove their innocence. Yet we still have people who refuse to accept this. People don't wait until after the trial to make up their minds. A very good example of this is the Oscar Pistorius bail hearing. The South African Minister for Women, Lulu Shingwana, was present and spoke angrily on television afterwards when bail was granted. Why was she there? Because she had prejudiced his guilt. The bail conditions, as agreed by the judge today, were prejudicial. Specifically, the condition that Pistorius's bail would be revoked if he was charged with a crime against women. Why? He has never been convicted of such a crime. It's shameful that people without full possession of the facts feel they have the right to judge a person guilty or claim they have gotten away with it, if not found guilty. Story 20. Atheists who disrespect religion or deny the healing and peace of mind it brings to people. I am an atheist through and through, but if someone says religion causes wars, or I don't get why people believe that bullcrap, or religion is just lies, or something, I will lose my crap at them. I am not religious, but that does not stop me from seeing that it helps people. Extremists will latch on to any ideology, not just religious ones. Story 21. The sleazy attitude that everything needs to be fun, especially work-wise, or otherwise it's not worth doing. This attitude is often accompanied with the idea that everything negative that happens to you is always someone else's fault, or that you're just such a special snowflake that you shouldn't need to do any boring or tiring work ever. I live in a country that has a decently working welfare system, and I see red every time I hear someone just leeching off the system as possible. Don't get me wrong, I definitely think society should have this safety net system, but I just get seriously disgusted when people often even quite arrogantly think they're smart. They can just leech as much as possible without needing to go to work, where other people are so stupid to do their boring 9-to-5 work. Story 22. I'm a really nice guy, probably one of the nicest people on the planet. I've worked in the service industry among other things, and like many others, I've known their struggle. I have a buddy who is a really nice guy too, especially when he's smoked, he's the chillest of the chill. Whenever we go anywhere, he has the worst attitude towards anyone serving him. He's immediately decided everything they do is wrong before he's met them, and is so condescending it makes my jaw clench. Yes, these people are serving you, and it's their job, but when you treat them like they are automatically inferior, it's just the most repulsive thing a person can witness. The worst thing about it is he seems to get off on it a little, and I just can't bring myself to tell him, "You are a jerk, and I hope you end up working for this guy washing dishes in the next few years." Story 23. How people talk about homeless people / hobos / panhandlers like they're animals or untouchables or just plain filth. Yes, maybe they take 10 seconds of your precious time as you're walking to work. Yes, maybe they're drug addicts. Yes, maybe their sob story isn't 100% true. Yes, maybe one time you tried to buy that one guy a meal, but he only wanted money, the ungrateful bastard. None of these things change the fact these are people, deserving of basic respect. I'm not saying you should give money to every person on the street, but it disgusts me when people talk about other human beings like they're garbage. Story 24. Censorship. People want everyone else to not say or show bad things because they can't teach their children that there are proper and improper things to say and do while in a workplace or in public. Then the same people that censor things take a phrase that could be misconstrued as something dirty, then try to censor it. Their own minds interpreted something harmless as dirty, so they need to protect the children from adapting the dirty minds that they have. Story 25. The suing culture. When did it become okay to sue people for as much as they can, for ridiculous sums of money? If any, suing someone should be for the amount of money to compensate for your potential losses. You were out of work for a month, then that's a month's salary, not several years' salary. In a car accident, it's the cost of the car, not some bullcrap whiplash, because that's the one thing doctors struggle to diagnose, so you can pull a fast one on them. And don't think you're innocent in all this Reddit, because let's face it, how often is lawyer up thrown around or I hope you sued? Accidents happen. If you lost out, you're owed what you lost, just because someone, or a corporation, has significantly more disposable money, doesn't mean you can get away with asking for considerably more money. Edit. I'm predicting a response of corporations need to be sued more so they learn their lesson. I agree they should take a bigger hit, but I believe for a better system, an independent body should fine them instead, filtering the fine into a public fund. Yes, the corporation should be punished more to prevent future repercussions, but I don't feel the person suing is the one entitled to that money, as that just encourages the let's sue everyone mentality. If a big corporation screws someone over, they sue for what they are owed, and the corporation is also fined as punishment. Story 26. Judging people, generalizing, boring answer. But one thing that really annoys me is how people don't try to interpret or judge information before they share it to 100 or more plus strangers. I know so much people on Facebook who posts these OMG facts or stuff that strawmans or generalizes from both liberal and conservative Facebook pages for folks to discuss about. The reality of it is they just want likes or share those things in an attempt to look smart. I'm too lazy to elaborate. Get the idea that spreading false or easily misinterpreted information and data to 100 plus people just for likes or karma is just so annoying.
Story 1. I was taught in my youth that giving to the point of self-neglect was proper if people needed it more than you. Then I would be upset when my expectations of others to do the same fell short in regards to me and things I needed help with. It wasn't until years later I realized that due to the laws of attraction, people who are generous givers mostly attract people who are selfish takers. After some time I realized I must be diligent about identifying and setting boundaries to those people before they bleed me dry. With the same analysis, I've tried to align myself with like-minded people and found a nice slice of happiness with a good group of people. Story 2. There will always be crazy people, no matter what race, religion, or opinion you have, and there will always be people who will associate those crazy people with the entirety of whatever race, religion, or opinion they have, no matter the evidence otherwise, which will end up furthering the madness and making things worse. 2. There will always be people who assume they know the entire situation and put it in simple ideas. No matter how broad and complicated the situation is, they think they've seen enough of the picture to know what's up, rather than the full picture. And there will always be people who put them down without explaining to them what's going on, and assume they're all idiots. Some either legitimately don't know, or are making an honest mistake, making them more likely to believe their own falsehoods out of spite, making things worse. 3. For some, common sense is a rare thing, and there will be people who will think lowly of them without explaining why what they're doing defies common sense, causing those who lack the common sense to feel justified. 4. There will always be pessimists who think they are realists or think they are mature since they see the world as a crappy place. There is both good and bad in the world. It isn't getting better, but it isn't getting worse. And there will always be optimists thinking they're improving the world when they're actually making things worse, making more pessimists. And to end in a bittersweet note, there will always be people who try to ruin the world, but there will always be people who try to make it a better place. There's plenty of evidence for both. Story 3. Moral code is subjective and the reality of human nature is cruel. What you see as moral, not everyone is going to, even if we go to extremes. You think what Hitler did was not moral? Probably. I hope so. Well, in his head it was probably moral. In the end, who gets to decide what's moral or not? Say you have an inescapable choice of having to decide between saving one loved one and a 100 random people. Some people would decide to kill their loved one and save the other 100, and some would let the 100 die and save the loved one. So which one is moral exactly? If you let the 100 die, their families will be sad and they will scold you. Hell, the whole world might. On the other hand, if you kill the loved one, others close to you, important to you will scold you, and that will also hurt you a lot, because it's the people that you really care about. Are you selfish if you let them die instead of your loved one? They have families too, but then again, that one person is your own family. Either way, you will feel like crap, and that's reality. My analogy here was a bit extreme, but it can be applied in other aspects of life. Story 4. We all like to think that we'd be the hero of our own story. That is a lie. Most of us wouldn't rescue Anne Frank, for example. Oh no. Some of us would be doomed along with her. Some would be the guards at Auschwitz. Others would be the ones who reported Anne Frank and her group to the authorities. But the worst kind of people, the kind of people most of us are, deep down, we would be the ones who stand by and do nothing. If you think you would never be that kind of person, you're lying to yourself. Peter never thought he'd deny following a man named Jesus around the country for 3 years. And yet he did just that, most likely to save his own skin. Story 5:1. That we will put ourselves and wants first all the time, every time, and any time. Anytime a panic, disaster, etc. happens, they are people who will overly hoard everything for themselves and not look out for others. Cruelly destroy other people and their property if it means we get what we want. Like kicking people out of their homes and lands to build fancy stores, condos, etc. not even caring that those people are or will be homeless. 2. That we like to feel superior to others even if everyone is the same, people will still find a way to be superior. Story 6. Humans are part of the animal kingdom, but we are able to think things through, but our primary instincts are still there. Stealing, fighting, killing, liking, and disliking. We pretend that we are so advanced that we aren't part of that primal world, but we are. Just watch an episode of Snapped or Cold Case Files. I think about this a lot. People will turn on you and go crazy for no good reason other than I didn't like you. So breaking that down to the animal world, if you have the scent of an outsider, you could be killed. If a pack of animals has an alpha, there is usually one that wants that spot and will kill to earn it. We aren't different at all. Story 7. We often create our personal narratives, assigning reasons to our actions after the fact. Many of the reasons you think you have for doing what you did were actually invented retroactively to maintain a coherent sense of self. This has many consequences. Here are 2 of them. If you do something bad to someone else, you will like them less. You will like them less because when constructing your narrative, you need to justify your behavior. But you won't realize that this is what you are doing. You will find reasons to dislike the people you hurt. If you do something nice for someone else, you will like them more, for the same reason, regardless of whether or not they are worthy of your admiration. Story 8. Man is selfish. We are all selfish in different ways. Even the person with a good heart you knew is selfish. It's just that being good tends to fool anyone that man ain't selfish when it actually is. There is always a hidden agenda behind good acts that the doer may not be even well aware of. As a child growing up in an environment where I see people helping others, I thought of those people as not being selfish for sharing what they have with others. But as I grew up, I realized that it is not the case. I noticed some details that my young eyes have never seen. Deceptions, lies, sugarcoating, and anything a man can think of to serve himself. Others are selfish because they publicly serve themselves among others, but don't you think that people helping others for the sake of self-satisfaction from receiving thank you ain't being selfish? Story 9. You'd think Europe is pretty homogeneous in terms of ideals, and we are. But in a staggeringly short time frame, one nation began purifying their culture and genetics at horrific expense to others. And you see this throughout history. There's a staggering ability of all people to disregard another's humanity and believe them lower than livestock. Kinda along the same vein, I think here in the West we assume we're good people. But really, all you have to do to be a good person in the West is not actively be a prick. The risk of starvation is low. Risk of dying from disease or infection is low even now. We have water, warm houses, and even despite the terrorist attacks, a low risk of coming under attack from invaders or even just regular assault. There's no real motivation to screw over another human. In fact, we have more reasons not to: imprisonment, financial penalty, public opinion. Most of us probably aren't good. We just have no real reason to be bad. But then you head into a competitive work environment, and nobody trusts anyone. People with a hypothalamus issue will knowingly drink themselves to death because their need for water is firing off as life or death. If we actually were in a life or death situation, I'd have to say we probably would slaughter another family to protect our own. I don't know. Never been there. But looking at what has happened with people in the past, I'd assume most people would slaughter another to steal their resources if they felt their need was great enough. Probably why the overarching hero of the West story is about self-sacrifice. Story 10. Racism will never go away. When I was a kid growing up learning about racism, I thought racists are all old generation thinking. Once the old people die, the world will be a better place. And sure, maybe they ensured systemic racism, but it's disheartening to see young adults being racist scum. I think we have an inherent us versus them ingrained into us back from survival days. Tribes had wars and raids and all that. Same way there's a theory that yawning is contagious because someone in the group is signaling it's safe to sleep. This is all speculation, of course. I have no hard data. Story 11. There is nothing more grim than this study here. It predicts the evolution of human social structure and is highly supported by history. Only read this if you're ready to be depressed for the next few days. Look up John Calhoun's study on rat utopia. It's a famous study, so you'll find it. To paraphrase it, humans are unique in our ability to independently control to some extent the supply of our demands. While other species rely on their habitat providing their needs, we can produce more supplies than we need to survive, carrying the human species into a state of overpopulation. We start developing traits that work to lower the population to balance the supply and demand. This means homosexuality, atheism, or the overall belief of no higher power. The ease of humans killing their own through abortion, cannibalism, selfishness, and laziness tend to overwhelm the population until the supply is much less than the demand. History has shown us proof of this, and this rat experiment shows us it's a fundamental trait of evolution. It's degrading towards humans, embarrassing, and makes those who studied this question common beliefs such as, we are children of a supreme being. and we are good and destined for greatness. This makes people feel we are indeed enslaved to nature, and we are nothing but predictable, insignificant diseases populating an infested Earth. Story 12. Most of society is about keeping human instincts in line, now that so many of them are out of step with practical reality. They made sense in the wild. They don't anymore, but that doesn't mean they go anywhere. Perhaps in time they'll be smoothed out by other evolutionary adaptations. But in a world with a population size, these large, most beneficial mutations just end up bred out. We're probably evolutionarily stagnant in many ways. So much the worse. Not every way society tries to wrangle human instinct is honest, just, or even has your best interests in mind. Many facets of our economy are specifically geared to game your brain, and they're shockingly effective when measured population-wide. We're better than slugs and monkeys and lizards and things, but we're still pretty much dumb animals. All of those higher functions of our brain amount to little more than a thin silken veil of reason atop a Mount Everest of archaic, involuntary programming. And because of that, most of our dreams going forward are probably doomed to be just that, mere dreams. This is likely the pinnacle of our capability, or we're very close to it. The best we can realistically hope for is that, of what remains of our potential, we will find in it the intellectual and industrial capability to design successors, robotic or organic, who can live out those dreams nature did not equip us to pursue for ourselves. Sweet dreams. Story 13. Some people genuinely don't love their children, and not all of those people go on to horribly exploit their children, but plenty of them just never get involved in their kids' lives in any meaningful way. There is no doubt that this is true. I certainly suspected it my whole life. At age 40, my mother confirmed this for me. The greatest mistake of my life was adopting you, she told me. Also, there hasn't been a day in the past 35 years I haven't regretted having you for a son. Surprisingly, I've come to be okay with this, 18 years on. I realized she just didn't have that spring in her watch. But in the 1950s-60s, women of her social group had children, period. If they couldn't make them, they adopted them. She just did what she thought was normal and required. Hearing her finally say it was actually a kind of a relief, I realized that I wasn't imagining her scorn and distance all those years as a kid. I left home at 18 and had little contact with her over the years, and was always blamed by family, and sometimes blamed myself, for not being a better son in those 20 years. I'm happy to report that I'm a deeply loving dad to my two sons, and blessed to be married to a woman who loves her children like mad. So no cycle of exploitation here. Praise God. Story 14. Violence not a solution to problems. I am not a violent guy, not at all. But I came to situations where a threatening approach quite saved my butt. Not saying we all should be violent, just saying that for some people, this is the only language they understand. You can't talk yourself out of every situation, especially when you're in one of the more difficult parts of this planet. Violence is the ultimate solution to unfixable problems. I'm not saying that to glorify violence, that's just a fact of life, a part of nature. Usually our biggest problems are other people, even if those people are just in the way blocking us from the problems we really want to solve. The most complete and final way to fix a person problem? Get rid of them. Got a person that society just can't save? Serial killer? Police control in prison is a form of protracted violence. Death sentences are obvious violence. What about a tyrant or dictator? Sic semper tyrannis. Government exists to control the use and application of violence. That is their main cartel. This is why terrorists pose such a direct threat to the government, because that set of behavior is a direct threat to the cartel. They can never defeat the government militarily, but just by existing, by creating an outlet for violence that is not under exclusive government control, they have circumvented the government's main source of power, and therefore undermine it. Story 15. Let's start at the top. People are essentially broken. You find me a stable, well-adjusted, normal person, and I will show you how they are almost, if not exactly, as broken as you. This is fine. As above, a lot of people want to be unique and special, but end up doing the same things as everyone else. This is also fine. Most people are scared of the same things: loneliness, speaking out, being forgotten, being discarded, etc. It's universal. Fear is what drives us to do the things we do, as it has always been. Morality is subjective, but people do not understand this or refuse to see it. A staggering amount of us just do not want to think critically. The ones that remain often misunderstand critical thinking for being opinionated. People are the same the world over. The culture or region-specific thing that you are so proud of doesn't mean nothing. It's fine to be proud of your heritage. It is not fine to pound that into every facet of your being. People make mistakes, all the time. 90% of all people making mistakes have justifications for those mistakes. Rarely do we own up to them. This is not fine. All the anger in the world is caused by unresolved pain. People are not smart enough to recognize that. As above, people are dumb. We may have evolved into making tools and art, but we are essentially without awareness. Once awareness is achieved, it is replaced by either apathy or misery. All in all, there is no fixing this. It's rarely spoken about since people just either ignore it or accept it as the truth of the world. Be happy with whoever you are, whatever you do. Try not to hurt people. If you do, own up to it and do the time. Be excellent to each other. Story 16. People will continue to hurt those with disabilities. There is no denying it, and it will not go noticed. Even the media has given up on the disabled. You rarely see news stories about those with disabilities nowadays, but mention something about race, good or bad, and the media is all over it. And for good reason. Black people have been around long before many disabilities became a thing. So in a way it makes sense, even though it isn't fair. In addition, society has taken an ignore the problem and it'll go away approach to disabilities. What do we think the disabled are? Husks. That eats up money that should go to more deserving people, like veterans or the elderly. Aren't those who fought for our country and our senior citizens more important than some disabled humans in wheelchairs? Society thinks, but only to itself. This is the way it's been for years, and in 2018, this is the way it's staying, and no one will do a thing about it. Story 17. Humans are amazing creatures capable of doing wonderful and kind things for ourselves, each other, and the world around us, along with the creatures within it. Humans are also capable of atrocities and horrors that are almost unspeakable at times. The best part, in my opinion at least, is that we are never limited to one extreme or another. Humanity is full of gray, where actions and motivations can be justified from one angle and completely baseless from another angle. There are few hard truths about humanity because of this. As for every person you meet, that one truth applies to, there's just the same chance that a different truth won't apply to them, making it invalid. It's near impossible to generalize a group so dynamic and changing such as humanity, and I think that's a great thing. Story 18. We accept that humans physically evolve. We accept that humans mentally evolve. If we see people from different countries evolve differently physically, Swedish people have blonde hair, Chinese people are on the shorter side, etc. There's no reason not to assume that humans won't evolve differently mentally, and in fact, that's what the results have shown. This is shot down, saying that the results don't count because the fact that there are different contexts wasn't accounted for. Basically, the base results, along with common sense, aren't supposed to count all due to wishful conjecture about what might happen if the context is accounted for. If some simple gene mutation gave a noticeable overall increase in intelligence, that trait would likely be selected for and already have dominated human evolution even before we left Africa. The only exception is if it came with a significant drawback. Note that humans have already evolved with significant drawbacks just to achieve the brain power they currently have, thus premature births, along with extended child-rearing. Basically, our brains are already highly optimized organs that have effectively made us masters of our environment. IQ differences do exist between different populations, but can be completely accounted for by differences in nutrition and education, thus why IQ has gone up for nearly a century. The minor physical racial differences you point out are almost all adaptations to specific environments, but it would be hard to come up with any similar mental adaptations that wouldn't just be better served by children learning about their environment. Story 19. People who care about you will still allow you to suffer if they benefit somehow, and if you've got no boundaries to stop them from taking your time, money, emotions, etc. For example, a parent might know they are clinging on to you emotionally and not letting you be independent or stunting your adult life. Yet they get that parental high or other benefits, so they keep doing it because you're not exactly stopping them from controlling your life. They might complain you need to move out, but will up the control as soon as you try. Another example, you might lend that one friend a free ride in your car everywhere. They know these actions might be dividing the friendship, or tiring you out or costing you money, but because you keep agreeing to help, they won't stop doing it. They know even with your passive complaints, in the end, you always cave. Same with that former date that just wants to be friends, but still treats you like a love interest. They will still call you up for that ego boost, even if it breaks your heart not to be closer to them. Know a few people who have gone through this one and argue this person is a great friend, possible future partner, etc. Worst part in all of these is once you start to say no, they will get mad because by that point they've been so used to you having no boundaries. It's more your responsibility to put up these boundaries and to stick to them, because people who should care for you will walk all over you, given the opportunity and benefits you let them take. Story 20. People like to believe that most people are good, while there are the few that are genuinely bad. I think it is largely the opposite. I personally think that most people are crap, and there are a few diamonds in the pile of garbage. It's pretty taboo to think, I've found. But I've seen some good people do some messed up stuff. My pastor at my former church ran off with some girl, leaving his wife and kids. I've seen a father leave his wife and 3 crying kids. I've seen a girl lead a guy on, feigning interest, only to steal hundreds of dollars from him saying, I'll pay you back in a week, and then ditch. All of these people perceived as good, but deep down they're scum. And I believe that's just how most people are. It's just depressing to admit. Story 21, we are all basically the same. Everyone likes to point out and highlight how their demographic is better in some way, or how some other demographic is somehow worse or more evil. I have lived and traveled to worked in over 20 different countries, and everyone everywhere is capable of good and capable of evil. There are cultural differences, of course, but those really are just academic. Food is not necessarily better in Florence. Art is not necessarily better in Paris. Muslims are not necessarily evil, nor are Jews or Christians. Whether you're a Republican redneck or a leftist hipster, we are all just trying to do the best we can with what we've got.
Story 1: The Milgram Experiment. In the early 1960s, a psychologist, Stanley Milgram, conducted a series of experiments to study obedience to authority figures. Participants were asked to deliver what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person, an actor, who was in reality unharmed. Shockingly, many participants obeyed authority figures and administered potentially lethal shocks, highlighting how ordinary people can commit morally reprehensible acts when following orders from authority figures. Story 2. I have a good one. Your stomach has its own nervous system, more or less separated from your main nervous system. This is called the enteric nervous system, ENS, and it primarily controls the muscle movements and enzyme secretions your digestive tract does in order to digest and process food. It does communicate with your central nervous system, but it's understood that the ENS is capable of operating independently from the rest of the body. Story 3. Same as others. I've been through the bystander effect too. I was 11 when my school had a camp focusing on our finals. One of my friends, a girl, is a tomboy, and she plays rough. She punched me in the stomach at 11, but I think that was her way of fooling around. During the camp one night, some of us were attacked with her hug. Nothing bad. The thing is, though, I'm skinnier than her, and her arm was hugging my neck. It was fine at first, but then I panicked because I couldn't breathe. I was pleading for her to let me go, even begging, but she was cackling. I reached out to the others for help. Literally, my arm stretched out for one of them, and they just stared. It went on long enough for me to think I was going to faint and die, causing tears to spring. Then she let go, and I ran upstairs crying. The others called our teacher, but they told her I was being possessed. It still pisses me off sometimes. Story 4. In a modern world, both sexes are primed to see the worst in each other, because they're pre-programmed with fantasies about the best in each other. They say, never meet your heroes. Sure, many people on both sides have done great things, but these people went through one hell of a journey to become that person. The ideal human being that did amazing things isn't perfect. Never was, never will be, but we hold on to what the nostalgia sets as the baseline. We all strive for these models of male and female perfection, when the dirty little secret is that it never existed. We just get better and make fewer mistakes. The saddest part is when we desire those false outcomes so intensely that we begin to subconsciously resent any member of the opposite sex that doesn't live up to those unrealistic expectations. Story 5. I think it's horrifying that humans say they are intelligent, yet they are a cancer killing the earth through sheer numbers, and still they breed. Those who choose not to breed are even shunned, and if they take measures to make sure they don't breed, such as being gay, gets them ridiculed. Story 6. Does anyone remember your memories in third person, like at certain angles behind you, almost as if you were looking through a lens? A lot of the time, my memories, whatever's left, are more like blurry photos rather than something I'm able to play out inside my head. Story 7. Okay, so in college, I was a sociology major, psychology minor, and my good friend and roommate was in child development. We would come home day after day, informing the other of major topics we'd learned for the day or week. Well, one day, our classes sort of aligned, and we went into a long discussion until we both came to the conclusion that children are sociopaths and psychopaths until around the ages of 8 to 10, whereas they begin to catch on to empathy and such. Those who don't usually grow up to be said sociopaths or psychopaths. I'm glad it has been confirmed we were not the only ones on this line of thinking. Story 8. The fact that polyamory is a part of human biology and nature based on survival instincts that have not been removed from human nature, thus making the phenomenon of cheating more prevalent than it should be. If monogamy wasn't so highly prized in most cultures than cheating, it would not be as bad of a thing as it is. Story 9. What I'm interested in, along with my psychology, is that in video games with RPG simulation with choices, you tend to do what is right, but what is actually right for you? I usually tend to be the good guy, helping others, keeping people happy, and thinking about decisions. At times, I do the opposite for the enemies in game because you want your side to win. I often reflect on what I do for my characters because I play the way I act. Even if video games are just a bunch of zeros and ones, it fascinates me to silently see someone's reflection when they play those genres, especially games like The Witcher or Fallout, because we all want to have a good ending for our characters and self. Or you just unalive everything on sight because why not? That's why there's a quick save. Story 10. We animals evolved to stink really bad so that we don't cannibalize each other into extinction. The human body has a good amount of nutrient value when consumed by another, due to pollution and genetics. The human sense of scent has been rapidly diminishing. Story 11. Few interesting facts to add to some of these. 1. If someone is being told to do something terrible to you by a member of authority, you better hope to God it's a rude individual. People described as rude or less likable are way less likely to just follow orders they don't morally agree with than average or nice individuals. 2. If someone falls in the pit, you pick them up. Not a fact, just a metalhead rule I thought back to when the trampling bystander effect stories were brought up. 3. There's a percentage of people who can't picture things in their head and or don't have an internal monologue. They are the minority, but they do exist and often don't think anything about them is different. 4. Anonymity, or even just the perception of it, has a huge impact on what humans are willing to do. Observe what you or others would be willing to say or do to another human while in a car or on the internet. Studies have shown that the level of hostility a person shows, as well as a lack of empathy, is startlingly higher and more common when we believe we can't be held responsible for our actions. Story 12. I'll add one more. Anterograde amnesia. Most people think of amnesia as only the storytelling trope of the character that wakes up somewhere and remembers nothing about their past. Retrograde amnesia. But anterograde amnesia is way more terrifying in my opinion, and I experienced it firsthand after a concussion once. Anterograde amnesia is the inability to form new memories due to being unable to encode new memories from short term, your immediate attention essentially, into long term. Imagine if nothing you did after the episode of anterograde amnesia could be remembered later. We base so much of our existence on being able to remember what we did later. When I got that concussion, I fully functioned for hours after. I know I must have walked back to my apartment since I was so close. I know I called a family member to take me to the hospital and have a sliver of a memory of doing so. I was told that I talked to a doctor and the front desk. Yet, all I concretely remember was a second before the longboarding accident, straight to waking up in the hospital bed. I functioned completely for roughly 3 to 4 hours after, yet it doesn't feel like I did anything that was described to me because I couldn't remember doing it. If that had lasted for a significant amount of time, I don't know if I would have been able to stay sane. It's like feeling as if someone else was in control of your body doing the things that you're told they did, with absolutely no first-hand recollection of it or feeling of control. The movie Memento actually has a lot of accuracy, though some inaccuracy, in how it portrays the medical condition, and was praised by neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists for doing so, if anyone actually reads this and is curious. Story 13. We know why we sleep. I don't remember exactly the terms now anyway. We get rid of some harmful chemicals that we produce while we are awake. That is why the Guinness World Record for not sleeping was banned. A guy stayed awake for way too long and developed dementia in that short time frame. He is or was a young adult. Go to sleep, people. It keeps you sane. Story 14. Emotions, touch, pain, feelings, taste, smell, and so forth are just illusions that our brain gives us. So we think we have a normal life. Everyone also has their own perspective of everything. Some people enjoy pain, others don't understand emotions. It's possible that everyone thinks they are something better than others. Everyone's eyes might also be seeing a completely different dimension, other color schemes, other textures, other shapes, different transparency. Story 15. When you make eye contact with someone and you feel uncomfortable, it's not weird. It's in your nature, your instinct. While for us modern people, eye contact means a sign of respect, except for some certain people, eye contact for some of the other great apes, like chimpanzees and gorillas, is a sign of disrespect. Our ancestors most likely found eye contact as a sign of disrespect as well. As our culture evolved, it became a sign of respect, the polar opposite of what it naturally means for our species. However, this instinct that it's a sign of disrespect stayed. So, by nature, many people will feel uncomfortable when making eye contact because their instinct tells them they will start a fight if they keep going. This instinct is weaker in some people and stronger in others. When you talk to someone you hate but not fear, you might have noticed that you feel the urge to look into their eyes because your instincts tell you to look into their eyes, because you subconsciously or consciously want to mess them up. Story 16. In my opinion, a fact about humanity that most don't accept is that we humans are bloodthirsty. Our most human traits are bloodlust and greed. Society makes us hide the side of us that wants to spill blood. We all have times when we want to just spill blood in sheer chaos. Story 17. The one thing that I do know about human nature is that there is an unprecedented amount of psychopaths living among us. I don't mean the stereotypical mask-wearing, knife-wielding psychos you see in movies. I'm talking about true psychopaths. Psychopaths are characterized by violent urges and high levels of intelligence, and many people lump psychopaths in with sociopaths. However, in my opinion, psychopaths are much worse. A psychopath comprehends the fact that what they're doing is wrong by the rules put into place by society, and thus, in an effort to conceal their nature, they purposefully blend into the crowd. This is what makes them terrifying. Anybody you know can be a psychopath. Absolutely anyone. As I like to say, human nature is the most horrifying thing to have ever existed on this planet. Story 18. Violence is part of human nature. Yet, people try to lie to themselves, saying that we are peaceful beings, because people are weak and can't handle words of honesty and truth. They need lies in their lives. Morality is something to be said, not to be kept, and so is the truth. Story 19. Group conformity. People often conform to group norms, even when those norms lead to harmful or unethical behavior. This phenomenon, known as groupthink, can result in disastrous consequences. Story 20. In-group bias. In-group bias is the tendency for individuals to favor their own social, ethnic, or cultural group over others. This bias can contribute to prejudice, discrimination, and even intergroup conflicts. Understanding and addressing in-group bias is crucial for promoting diversity, inclusion, and global cooperation. Story 21. Cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. Confirmation bias, for example, causes people to seek out information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs while ignoring or dismissing contradictory evidence. These biases can distort our perception of reality and hinder objective decision-making. Story 22. Tribalism. Humans tend to form tribes or social groups as a way of establishing identity and security. However, this tribal mentality can lead to the exclusion of outsiders and foster animosity between different groups. Overcoming tribalism is a challenge for building a more inclusive and harmonious society. Story 23. De-individuation. De-individuation occurs when individuals lose their sense of personal identity and moral responsibility when part of a larger group or crowd. This can lead to behaviors they might not engage in when acting as individuals, such as participating in riots or mob violence. Story 24. Moral disengagement. Moral disengagement is a psychological mechanism that allows individuals to rationalize immoral or harmful behavior. This can involve minimizing the consequences of one's actions or blaming external factors. Recognizing these mechanisms can aid in promoting ethical behavior. Story 25. Social hierarchies. Throughout history, humans have organized themselves into social hierarchies with varying degrees of power and privilege. These hierarchies can perpetuate inequality, exploitation, and oppression. Addressing social hierarchies is a fundamental challenge in achieving social justice. Story 26. Narcissism. Narcissism involves an excessive focus on one's own needs, desires, and importance, often at the expense of others. Narcissistic individuals may display manipulative and self-centered behaviors that can harm relationships and communities. Story 27. Female mate preferences change with their menstrual cycles and pregnancy. After their period when they are least fertile, women prefer men who are less aggressive and responsible. The week before their period, when they are most fertile, their interest is in aggressive, muscular, high testosterone men. When a woman gets pregnant, her taste usually shifts back to men with lower testosterone levels, and stays that way while she is pregnant, nursing, and if she spends a lot of time with children afterwards. Men's testosterone also dips dramatically if they spend lots of time with children, particularly their own. It is theorized that this is how we hormonally settle into being families. It's also a safeguard against infidelity and males being aggressive towards their mates and children. The problem is that modern technology and society really screw this system up. Birth control pills trick a woman's hormones into thinking she's pregnant, which can cause health issues long term, but always causes behavioral change. In many sad cases, a woman will be on birth control during dating and early marriage, and then stop when they decide they want a baby. This can cause them to lose attraction for their partner because her internal chemistry has changed and is no longer interested in him. Not to mention, men and women working so much and being away from their kids who are in daycare hormonally tricks them into thinking they are single again, and thus, infidelity is much higher for working men, and especially working women. Story 28. Humans have better peripheral vision in the dark or dimly lit areas than frontal vision. This is because the rod cells that react better to dim lights are mainly located in our retina's periphery. I would say the only reason you could take this as creepy is if you are in the dark with just a bit of light and see something move in your peripheral vision. But when you look at it straight on, you can no longer see it. Story 29. There are people who abuse animals, and people who refuse to spend any money on veterinary care, but drive away in a Audi with their diamond-encrusted gold chains around their necks, and then yell things at me like, "You won't help my pet who can't keep anything down for 5 days because I have no money. How can you sleep at night? I work in vet med." Story 30. Racism is pretty silly. We're all humans. I've been friends with Asians, Mexicans, African Americans, whites, Native Americans. You name it, and all have made racist comments. I just don't get it. I'm a mixture of a bunch of different races. And hopefully someday we get to the point where we can just see people as the individuals they are. Story 31. Nationalism. I don't mean healthy pride for your heritage and culture. I mean beating your chest for some imaginary line people drew in the dirt 400 years ago. Nationalism is healthy for countries, in just the right amount. But too much or too few can lead to disaster. If there's too much, then people will mindlessly slaughter other nations solely for the benefit of their own country. They will discriminate against people from other nations. They will have unjust double standards that lead to hypocrisy, and the people will only care about the states while having little regard for individual rights and freedoms, resulting in an illiberal society. If there's too few, then the nation won't be able to defend against assaults from other nations, and society won't be able to properly function due to individuals only caring about themselves and not caring about the nation as a whole. Nationalism is beneficial in the right amount, but too much or too few can have catastrophic consequences. Story 32: Cruelty in Experiments. History is replete with examples of scientists conducting morally questionable experiments on humans. The Tuskegee syphilis study, for instance, ran from 1932 to 1972 and involved withholding treatment from African American men with syphilis to study the natural course of the disease. The Stanford Prison Experiment, conducted in 1971, saw college students take on abusive roles when assigned as prison guards, revealing how easily people can become cruel when given power. Story 33: Cannibalism. While rare and extreme, instances of cannibalism have occurred throughout history. For instance, the Donner Party, a group of American pioneers stranded in the Sierra Nevada mountains in 1846, resorted to cannibalism to survive during a harsh winter. The act is a grim testament to the lengths humans might go to in dire situations. Story 34: Dark Web Activities. The dark web is a part of the internet intentionally hidden from search engines. It's known for facilitating illegal activities, including drug trafficking, weapon sales, hacking services, and even hiring hitmen. It exemplifies the hidden and disturbing underbelly of the digital world. Story 35: Psychological Manipulation. Manipulative individuals use psychological tactics to control and exploit others. Gaslighting, for example, involves subtly manipulating someone's perception of reality to make them doubt their sanity. Such manipulative behavior can have severe emotional and psychological consequences for victims. Story 36: Parasitic Behavior. Parasitic individuals exploit the goodwill and resources of others without reciprocation. This behavior can range from financial fraudsters taking advantage of vulnerable individuals to emotional manipulators who drain the energy and resources of their victims. Story 37: Psychic Scams. Fraudulent psychics and mediums prey on individuals seeking guidance, especially those in vulnerable emotional states. These scams often involve hefty fees for services that lack any scientific validity, taking advantage of people's desire for connection or closure. Story 38: Brainwashing and Cults. Brainwashing techniques are used by some individuals or groups to control the beliefs and behaviors of others. Cults, in particular, manipulate their members through isolation, indoctrination, and charismatic leadership, leading to extreme devotion and potentially dangerous actions. Story 39: Obsessive Stalking. Obsessive stalking involves individuals fixating on and harassing their targets to an extreme degree. Victims often experience severe emotional distress, and stalkers may escalate their behavior to physical violence, making it a deeply disturbing aspect of human behavior. Story 40: The "it's okay as long as I'm doing it" mentality that we all seem to have. Girls I know don't want to be shamed for embracing their sexuality, but they rip into a girl that they think is slutty. Guys call out other dudes for being players and girls for being easy, but then hit on every girl they see. The list of this goes on and on.